So today we're going to talk about wool. I think it'll be kind of there's like a lot of the things we've talked about and we'll talk about. I think we can go on tangents all over the place, and each question probably has an 30-40 minute discussion on each of them. So
Yeah,
but I think
yeah,
we ought to just start at the top and kind of just go through some of the basics and the I guess the first question I got is, what's the difference between coarse wool and fine wool? You hear a lot about those terms, but what defines that, and what's the difference between those and why?
well, the way I look at that, there's several different measurement systems that we've used in wool over the years. I think what we look at is our micron measurement in the fiber. And I know you guys test all your wool, do you? Send samples in of all your wool?
Not everything, all the big lots. So
Okay.
anything over 7 to 10 bales we'll test. It depends, unless there's a special reason.
Yeah, right, right. We've done, I mean, we're a different setup entirely, but we've sent some of our wool into the Montana State Lab. And so I think kind of the dividing line that I look at, um, and certainly with our wool, is probably that 22, 23 micron and lower would be fine wool, and anything above that would be medium to coarse. Um, a lot of our wool is in that 27 to 31 micron range, which makes it pretty coarse. And I think, from a commodity standpoint, at least with our wool, that dividing line has a lot to do with the value and marketability of our wool if we're selling it in lots with other producers. Um, but I also think that that's not the only measurement in terms of wool quality. The breeds that we run have some different qualities to their wool, even though it would measure coarse. That could provide some other opportunities for us, I think.
So you want to? That's actually one of my questions right there. That I is what are oftentimes everybody talks about micron, and micron. I believe it's 22 under 22 micron. You can wear against your skin without being itchy, and so that's usually the reason why the difference between fine wool and coarse wool. But you touched on it there. What are some of the other ways to measure wool which are just as or more important than micron?
Well, and you've hit on the next to skin wear, and there's some properties in our wool that I'm obviously biased, but I've got some knit garments made with our wool that are perfectly comfortable to wear. Luster is a factor in wool quality that, in terms of its I guess you could kind of define that as shininess, but a lot of the long wools, the Blueface luster wools like we've got, are really high luster wools, which make them attractive for some outer garment type things. Um, the amount of crimp, the composition of the scales on the wool fiber makes some wools easier to felt. And so while it's a real niche market, our particular wool is pretty desirable in terms of the felting market because it does hold together well when it's felted. What are some of the other quality parameters that you guys look at in your wool in terms of value?
Yes. So some of the other parameters we look at are yield. Number one, that's the finished product you have in your wool. So you take the grease and the vegetable matter out, and any other contaminants, and that's a really important measurement for us. Strength is a very important thing. California wool, typical California wool, because we lamb in the fall and shear in the spring, our break is in the middle of the wool. And if you can move that break to one end or the other, that's the weakest point of the wool. So that's when you pull it, that's where it breaks most consistently at. California wool tends to break in the middle of the fiber, which is a big discount versus the rest of the nation.
Right.
Because if you want a piece broken off, you want a small piece, not the whole thing split in half. And so that's a really big factor. And if you can move that break you can add substantial value to your wool clip. We haven't done that, but that's a factor. Then also length, the longer the fiber, the better it holds as you weave it together. And then one of the main things is when we're shearing, I stand at the press and we feel every fleece, and there's a hand care. I don't know the term for it, but it's a feel of that fleece, and it's a softness of that fiber. Yep. And there's a substantial difference that's kind of outside of micron that is a factor in our wool. And if you have a real fine wool fleece, but it has a rough hand, we pull it out. And vice versa, if we have a coarser wool, maybe a 24-25, but it has a really, really nice hand and it's a long fibered wool, we'll actually put it into our fine end line just because it's going to help that wool a bunch. And then the last thing is the brightness, the whiteness of the wool is also a thing you can work towards, because the whiter it is, the easier it is to dye. And in American wool, American wool tends to be yellow because of the Rambouillet influence. And so those are probably the main factors we use. So you said your coarse wool, you use the coarse wool for felting, and felts go into hats and all sorts of different vests and things like that. So just because you can't wear a base layer of a coarse wool doesn't mean you can't have a coarse wool jacket or a coarse wool hat or a couple other different garments. But can you talk about maybe a few of the other uses for coarse wool?
Yeah. There is a growing market, I think, in coarse wool and things like bedding material and quilting material. We've sold quilt bats and things like that. There are folks on the North Coast that do a lot of bedding material, so pillow stuffing and mattress covers and things of that nature, where the fiber itself is covered with something softer, but it provides some loft and some insulation and some other properties. There's also a growing market for using wool as home insulation. And we actually thought about that this year with our coarse wool not really selling, about taking our clip and at least having it scoured and cleaned, and then using it for attic insulation or wall insulation. It has really, really good insulating properties. It's fire resistant. So it does all the things that a fiberglass insulation would do, and yet we grow more of it every year. It's renewable on an annual basis. And so I think there's some opportunities to take some of those types of products and really expand on what we can do with coarse wool.
Isn't it amazing how so many products that are sold that are these petroleum-based products or different synthetic-based products, and how they are selling, but with the sales pitch of what wool already does.
Yep.
Be it sports active wear and its moisture wicking qualities, be it insulation and fire retardant, be it heavy workwear and durability, all of those things wool has already. That's natural to the characteristics of wool. But yet synthetics are, they rule the roost, it seems like.
They dominate the market. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Do you think that's changing those? That it seems like wool's kind of coming back in terms of desirability and acceptability and access to those types of things. Is that changing a little bit?
Absolutely. I think so. I think, there's this, the whole push to natural, and understanding where things come from. Wool really fits into that well. The only reason wool isn't sold is because people don't understand where it's from and how it's made. It kind of gets back to that diversity of the sheep. It's such an amazing product. There's a reason it was the first domesticated animal, because of the characteristics of wool. I mean, I wear a long sleeve wool undershirt in the summertime because it keeps the sun off of my skin and it breathes, and I stay cooler wearing wool than I do with short sleeves. And I think just in our own deal, we market our wool. We market wool a lot of different ways, but our best wool from our ewes goes to a local American produced production system, and the opportunity there is really phenomenal. It seems to be consistently growing. The large brands are starting to look for wool, and then with the issues that we've had with the trade issues, but then kind of a realization of our dependency on foreign processing and the crutch that actually is, which now with this COVID-19 deal, how it's really destroyed a lot of international trade. It's just stopped flow. There's not flow right now. That's really it's really highlighted the value of American grown, processed, and produced products.
Yeah.
Whether it's wool,
Yeah.
but any kind of product really. And
Yeah.
I
think there's some interesting things developing kind of for smaller scale producers and for coarse wool here locally too. You know, there's Fiber Shed over on the North Coast that's really focused on kind of restoring a more regionalized fiber producing system. And they've taken the step actually of actually forming a co-op as well to do some marketing. And we've been in discussion with them this year about maybe taking our wool clip as a trial run to do something different with coarse wool, but keep it in California, keep it local, and make it available as some of those other types of products, whether it's bedding or insulation or what have you. So I think there's some interest again in kind of rebuilding that more regionalized system that we once had in this country.
So what kind of options or I guess let's go to the basics of how do you process wool? So the shearing, every sheep farmer knows what shearing is, but what happens when you shear? You shear and then where does it go?
Well, I can describe what we do and what we've done with some of our wool because it's kind of a microcosm, and yours is probably following the same process on a much larger scale, I suspect. So when we shear, we do look at each fleece as it comes out of the shearing barn, and we make some sorts like you do in terms of quality. We don't have as much to sort off, and so we probably don't have as much uniformity in our A line versus our B line of wool. But we do some sorts, and we skirt those fleeces. From there, typically wool is scoured, which is a process of removing the lanolin and the dirt and the veg matter. We have sent some to a little scouring facility in Woodland in Yolo County here locally, and it's interesting to see that process work. Basically warm water and detergent, and from that you get a product with the grease removed. From there, typically wool is carded, which is a method of aligning all the fibers so that further processing can be done with that. So it from that process we have the ability to felt with it or to spin it for yarn, to do a variety of things with it from there. But really it's the scouring, carding, and then spinning process in a nutshell that gets it to a finished product. Did I miss anything?
No, I got shearing, sorting, cleaning, carding, spinning, and weaving.
Yep.
Which is basically, I mean, there's a lot of detail in that, and I think we could take, you could take 2 hours and really get into deep diving, but it really is amazing on the wool side how when you break down the production system, how many steps there are through it and why it's so expensive in the store versus the farm gate value of wool. And then you have different, and where a lot of the expense comes in, I think, is the different facilities' abilities to handle the types of wool. Some specialize in coarse wool, some specialize in fine wool, some specialize in the in-between. The size of the lot makes a difference as to where you can go. Colored wool, non-colored wool. You have some like crossbred types with some hair. all those kind of things factor in on where exactly you can go. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges or pressures on the wool industry is you know, over the past 50 years, our infrastructure as a commercial industry has collapsed. But I feel like we're at this turning point where now there is a lot of demand for processing on a small to mid-sized scale, and even on the large scale too. The two big scouring plants are backed up, and I know the spinner there. I guess there's one spinner in the country, and it one big, you know, big lot type place, and it's there's a lot of pressure on that. And so hopefully over the next 10 to 15 years, we can add some infrastructure there, which will help people take their product to market.
Absolutely.
What one kind of opportunity for us that's been really exciting is, and I, you know, being a guy that isn't really too into knitting, I'm absolutely blown away by the expanding market of the knitting industry, which always has been described as a cottage niche industry. And it is nowhere near that anymore. It is a full-fledged, powerful industry that commands a lot of value, demand on products, and it's I'm really excited about the knitting industry, which is funny for me to say, but I'm curious your thoughts on that market and the opportunities for people to take their wool, spin it themselves, and sell it at the farmer's market or on Etsy or some of these platforms.
I think there's huge opportunities there too, and it's interesting in that that segment of the market for wool is really focused on kind of the connection with producers. It's been really fun on Instagram, which I hear you're on Instagram too. But to connect with, you know, people that are seeking out sources of wool and want to know how that wool's produced and where it comes from and what kind of sheep they are and all of those things. I think that's created a real connection between the producer and the end user that's exciting and I think durable to the extent that we can supply that market with products that people feel a connection with. I think you know, we've done a little bit of value-added processing of our wool at farmers markets. It's interesting in California that if you have a natural colored wool product, you can sell on the certified side of a farmer's market because you can certify that wool came from your sheep. If you dye it, you can't be on the certified side of the market under current regulation, which is, you know,
sounds like we put farmers market regulations and rules on our topic list.
That's for a future
Right.
conversation. But you know, I think one of the issues at a small scale like we operate is this idea of value added. And if you look at kind of the governmental definition of value added farm products, basically it's changing the form of the product from one form to another. I'm enough of an economist that doesn't totally satisfy me. I think you actually have to add value to it if you're going to call it a value added product. And so you have to account for the cost of taking that raw fleece and going through that production chain and getting a skein of yarn that you can then sell. And you have to be able to add value at each step of that process. So if I can sell my wool for $1.50 a pound grease weight, I've got to account for that cost as I go through the processing system and make sure that $1.50 and the expense to take it from that grease wool to a finished product is accounted for in the price that I'm selling my yarn.
And a profit margin.
Yep.
Because you're not working for free.
Yep.
Otherwise, you're not adding value. You're just maintaining the
exactly.
Same. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's amazing to me that this spinning market or the knitting market, how you mentioned the natural colored. So historically, the whole time we've ever been at Amy Livestock, I can't do anything with the black wool. We take it, put it on the truck, we take it to the auction yard, they sell it. It's, you know, it's decent black wool. It's nothing bad, nothing good. But we've gotten no money for it. 25 cents, 30 cents maximum.
Yeah.
Well, now this last year, I was able, through the knitting world, we're able to sell our black wool now at a good value. I'd say the same or more than our high end fleece, and it's all
Wow.
because we're able to get it into those markets that are there. But just navigating the production chain to get your product from the farm gate to that person's door is quite a challenge. But there's a lot of opportunities with the new media, the different platforms that are out there. There's Etsy's, I think, the big one, but there's a couple of like Facebook for knitters. I can't remember the names of it, but there's all sorts of platforms like that if you can take your product and get it to a point, you can start monetizing it better. And it's certainly, I think, in the current economic situation where everything is a lot of things have collapsed, including the lamb meat price. Our industry has become so dependent on the meat and has thrown the wool by the wayside that times like this, it really makes you realize and appreciate how those multiple streams of income off of multiple economic sources are really important to try to maintain. And one of the main base reasons why we all have sheep is so we can sell wool and meat, not just meat. Because when that meat market crashes, you still have some wool. Now, today's world, the wool and the meat are down, but that makes you look at taking it that next step further on how do you take your products and figure out a way to contract them and create these partnerships so that way you can help isolate yourself from some of these downturns. Sometimes the value in a contract or a direct market isn't the price you're receiving. Oftentimes people chase dollars per pound or the price, but having an opportunity to sell your product oftentimes is worth more than that premium that you think you're getting by getting a better price than your neighbor. Really, it's being able to sell it when things are down has a huge value on your bottom line.
I think that's really important. And I also think one of the things that is important, regardless of the scale that you're operating on, is the reputation for the quality of your product, whether that's meat or fiber. I think when people know what you produce and how you produce it, and I think looking at your operation, you're very transparent in the things that you do to produce a quality product. We try to be really transparent with what we do too. And I think because of social media now, that ability, that transparency and reputation have value in the marketplace. And I think that really shows when we're going through a situation like this as well, because you have an opportunity to move your product because people know that they're getting value for it. And I think that's kind of an underappreciated, particularly for new people getting into the business, how important that attention to detail and quality is, and how that reputation, good or bad, stays with you. But I think that's we've had that experience where we were able to get more money for our lambs, for example, just because people knew what they were getting. Yeah, and I think that's important too.
Yeah, absolutely. And just the value when things are down, like right now in the California spring lamb market, there's basically no bids for people wanting to buy sheep. But if you have a contract and a reputation and some quality, you'll get yours sold where somebody else might not. And so, having those, maintaining quality and maintaining good relations and, understanding where your product's going and taking the initiative to, and looking at those. I think a lot of times people like to trade, or when they're trying to price their product, they look at it as an adversarial position. And, you're trying to get the most you can from that buyer who's trying to get the least out of you. And it's an adversarial role.
Right.
And I think it's really important to realize that both sides are running businesses.
Yep.
And you need to ask for the most you can get, and they need to ask for the least they're able to pay. But at the same time, that relationship at its base is a complementary relationship, because if all segments are not successful, the foundation collapses.
Yep.
And so to always remember that these relationships and the industry partners that you have and these roles, they're not adversarial at their core. It's really important that you go into a negotiation with the idea of creating long-term partnerships that are going to pay everybody dividends year over year over year, not I'm going to get the most I can for today, and I hope they go broke next year. I'll sell it to someone else.
Right.
That's not healthy for an industry. And like I said, that doesn't take away from the fact that there is give and take when you're negotiating a price. It's just that you got to remember that the reason you're at the table talking isn't because you hate each other.
Yep.
It's because you want to work together, and there's a base partnership there that you need to maintain.
And I think that's, I'm just going to add, I think even at the scale that we operate at, and having done some direct marketing in the past, remembering that we're part of this bigger system, that we all need to be profitable to be able to sustain it. And I think that's a really important distinction. That it's there, as you said, there's give and take, but it's also really important to remember that I need those businesses further down the production chain to be successful as well, or I don't have any place to go even at my size with the products that we produce. I think that's a really important point.
So my last question that I think we ought to touch on, since we're talking a bit about wool, but can you talk real quick about how you prep your sheep and how you run a shearing day? Just quick.
Yeah, and it'd be interesting to see how similar or different they are to yours. So we typically shear about 6 weeks after the first or the last lambs are born, which seems to always put us around Mother's Day, much to my wife's delight. But the sheep shear easier after they've been nursing for a little while. So for us, we shear here at our home place. It's the only time of year that we have all our sheep at our home place. They come home. We typically shear on a Saturday. So the sheep come home here Wednesday or Thursday. And we pull them off the night before we shear. We pull them off feed and water just so that they're more comfortable on the shearing board because they don't have full rumens. And it's like me, if you made me sit cross-legged style after Thanksgiving dinner, I couldn't do it for very long. But if I haven't eaten for 12 hours, it's a little more comfortable. We still have nursing lambs when we shear, so we put the first group of ewes that we shear under cover overnight, just in case we get a heavy dew or a rain, so that they're dry to begin the day with. We sort the lambs off, and then we shear in a bullpen style with a single shearer. So we put it's about a 12 by 12 pen. We put 8 ewes in there with the shearer. He catches them one at a time. As the last one's shorn, we kick those out onto grass, bring the next set of ewes in to be shorn. As he's shearing, we pull fleece out and put it on a skirting table, which allows us to look at the quality of the wool, allow second cuts to drop out, little short pieces of wool to drop out of that fleece. And then we sort wool by black face versus white face into 2 different sets of wool. Ewes come back out nice and bright and sparkly, and go back on grass and find their lambs, and we go back to the ranch the day after shearing. So that's kind of our system. How do you guys go about? What does shearing day look like for you?
So shearing day for us starts about 2 weeks before shearing day. We have EID tags in all of our ewes' ears, which we record all sorts of different data points on them. One of the data points we record is we have our ewes. We take our ewe lambs. We did all the sheep last year, and then this year we just do the ewe lambs. So we just do the ewe lambs every year. And we go through the ewes by hand, and we mark in the ear tag the coarse wool lines.
Okay.
So the theory is always, well, the theory that we run with in all of the way we operate is we're always wanting to eliminate the bottom 5 to 10%.
Yep.
And with the ear tags, we're sorting the bottom 5 to 10%. So we take all those sheep and we run them through auto drafter, and we sort the coarse ones off. The ewe lambs from that past year we'll bring through, sort by hand, and we'll sort those off. And so then we'll have bunches of sheep, and we'll have basically the standard ewe line, and then we'll have a coarse wool line.
Okay.
And then to make things fun, this year we bought a bunch of sheep out of Idaho. So we had 3 lines. We had Idaho, fine wool, and coarse. So then shearing day, we do the same thing, leave them in the pen overnight. We forgot one day, first day of shearing, and the plant got really wet because we're like, oh, better put them in overnight. But we shear with a mobile crew that comes in. They shear on a land plant. A lot of places use trailers, shearing trailers. These are it's a land plant, so they put plywood down, build a structure over the top of themselves with canvas and pipes, and then each shearer has a pen. And then you throw the ewes in the backside, and they grab them one by one, shear them, and kick them out into their pens. And then when they're in their pens, we'll scan their ear tags and brand them and kick them out and count them.
Okay.
And so that's generally how it works. But when we're shearing during the ewes, I'm constantly at the wool press itself, and we don't have a skirting table. So when they're shearing on the ground, the wool pickers pick it up, and when they pick the wool up, they do it correctly, which a lot of times they don't, but when they do it correctly, they'll pick it up, and the heavy stuff goes to the bottom, and you swipe that skirting off and leave it in the plant, and another guy rakes that off.
Okay.
And we also have guys with rakes the whole time, making sure bellies are going in the bellies bags and tags going in its own spot. So we try to keep it as clean as possible. We take our own crew and put them in this inside. It's one thing I'd encourage anybody to do if they're hiring a custom crew out, is be involved. Get in the pens, get in and start, like, don't get in the way of the shearers, because that's the number one rule, is protect the shearers and make sure you don't make them mad, because it's hard work and you don't want to make it harder. But if you get involved and care about the wool, it helps those shearers and everybody involved on that custom crew side actually respect and appreciate the craftsmanship of what they're doing, which is something that we really lack. I think I think it's really hard to find, to find crews with 15 guys that all of them care about the craft and not just about the money. And there's certainly shearers out there that do that, but they cost too much for me, and it's hard to get one guy to come in and do 4,000 sheep.
Yep.
So, but it's that craftsmanship side of the deal. It's two sides. You as a producer have to care about the wool, which makes the shearers care about the job they're doing, and so that's really important. So we go in and then it'll come to the press, and on our fine wool line, I'll go and I'll be sorting every fleece, and I'll be cutting out any of the off stuff. So anything that's too short, anything that's too dirty, anything that skirts that came in, I'll pull that off and we'll be pressing it. And then on the coarse line, I'll reverse that, and I'll be creaming the best fleeces out of there. So anything that has come through that's pretty nice, that can still hold together well, those kind of things I'll take and I'll put into the fine line. So I'm constantly at the press sorting the wool. And then Jeff, thank goodness for Jeff, because he's the one that does all the accounting, and he's counting sheep and moving bunches and stacking wool bales and making sure everything's getting accounted for correctly, because there's no way I could do it all by myself. I've tried before, and I end up, not being at the press for half the day. And so that's kind of generally what it is. And then probably the most important thing that we do after shearing is, once we finish shearing, we spray all of our sheep with anti-parasitic.
Yep.
And that will do so much for your wool clip for the following year.
Yep. What do you use?
Permethrin.
Okay.
Yeah.
We use it. We use a pour-on at that stage too. Well, before we ship back on Sunday, we'll treat everybody. One of the things that you said reminded me, I think, at our scale, it's not like somebody can come and knock out all of our ewes in an afternoon. It's a full day's worth of work for a guy who's good. And we've got a great shearer who takes pride in his craft and has helped me learn how to better our wool clip. But we also have a discussion at the beginning of the day just to outline what everybody's going to do so that everybody's aware of what their job is that day. And my job is typically to make sure that everything runs correctly, that somebody's catching sheep if they have to, that the shearer is never waiting for sheep. We get a good price because he finishes one ewe and the next one's ready for him. And I think that's part of my job, is to make sure that part of the day flows well. Because we've got just one guy shearing, I can always as it comes off typically, which I think is important regardless of the scale that you're operating at, to take the time to look at what you're producing and to be able to assess the quality of what's coming off the sheet. But it's a similar day, just a different scale and pace of operation, really.
Yeah, same day, just I got 7 of them, and you got
yeah, exactly.
to do it in one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
the other thing too we do is we always shear pairs in the morning and dries in the afternoon.
Oh, okay.
That's another big important factor, because you want to make sure you finish your bunches. So if you have ewes and lambs together, we shear those in the morning, so that way everything can be paired up, and there's no question you're going to get it done. And then we'll fill the end of the day with the dries, so that way we can cut that bunch in half however we want, and they can shear to whatever time they need to shear till.
And we end our day, our single day, with shearing the bucks for the same reason. Get all the pairs out of the way, and then the rams come in to be sheared.
Yeah, we do shear our rams in the morning. We got 130, and so those guys, we actually split them this year. We did half of them one day and half of them the other day, just because they're big and the guys get tired. So get them done when they're fresh.
Yep.
But
I have one last question for you.
Yeah.
What's the oldest wool garment that you own?
Oldest wool garment that I own. That's tough. I'm pretty young. I got a 13-year-old hat that I wear. Although it's my rain hat. I wear it in the winter. The cowboy hat.
Yeah.
And it's still in good shape. Good felted wool hat. Some good wool in there. The undershirts that I wear, they last probably, they last 4 or 5 years at least, and you wear them every day, so you're getting a lot of wears out of them. What about you?
I've got a Pendleton that belonged to my dad that's older than I am, and I've got a Filson coat that's probably older than I am.
That's cool.
Both of which I've got a Pendleton coat older than I am, and they get pretty good use in the wintertime. But
yeah,
it's
amazing how well it holds up. I one time I heard they're hard to find, but back in the day they were making Levi's denim with interwoven with wool.
Yeah,
and then the pants companies, they couldn't sell anymore because you'd buy 1 or 2 pairs, and then they
last all your life
for like 3 years, and so they wouldn't be able to sell another pair. And then of course the high price point, but still now I go through Levi's pretty quick.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Well, when we talk next week, you will be done shearing, right?
Oh yeah, I hope so. Yeah, we'll be done. We only got like 2-3 days left, so we'll be done quick.
Good.
Yeah, so I'm excited. Our wool was great this year too. It's a little bit dirty as far as stickers, I think, because of the dry February. We had some foxtail and Fillory bloom a little earlier than normal, and so there was a little bit more in there than I really was hoping for. But I was really pleased with the direction our wool has gone since we've kind of implemented the ear tag system 4 or 5 years ago. we're seeing the fruits of that now in our genetics, and the difference in the wool quality between our coal ewes and our running age ewes was substantial, which is what I like, because that means we're progressing the right way.
That's progress. Yep.
And I was really excited with that. And we made some good wool purchases. We bought a fancy merino ram off of the California ram sale. We're really excited about. It's got some phenomenal fiber, so it'll be good for our ewe lambs. And yeah, I love my wool, and I'm excited to get this year's up and tested. So
You know, regardless of scale, shearing time is a whole lot of work, but it's one of my favorite times of year too.
Yeah.
I really like seeing that whole process from start to finish. And
yeah,
nice to have it done, but nice.
Shearing and lambing, just there's something fun. Shipping's fun too, but shearing and lambing are just tons of work and a lot of fun. That's why you do it.
Yep. Absolutely.
All right, Dan. I guess we're done for this episode, but we'll catch you next week on Sheep Stuff You Should Know, huh?
I'm Dan Macon, and you are
Ryan Mahoney.
awesome. See you next week.
See you next week, Dan.